This is Learned It from an 80s Song. I'm your coach, Patricia Freiberg. Today we have a very special guest. Please welcome Zach Falconer-Barfield. Zach is the gentleman entrepreneur. He's the co-founder of The Perfect Gentleman, Dazzle Media, and The Suited Chef. He's been an entrepreneur since he was 19 years old, setting up 15 businesses of his own. He's also been involved in the startup of 25 businesses across 8 different industry sectors. He's written books and plays, he's performed on many stages, and has done stand-up comedy. Zach's mission is to help men find the best version of themselves. He teaches them skills to make them the modern gentleman. Zach, it's so great to have you here on Learned It from an 80s Song. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
No, thank you very much for having me, Patricia. Thank you so much.
Well, this is first of all, I need to comment on, Zach, what you're wearing, because you look fantastic. And for those of you when you get to see this on YouTube, you'll see he has the most amazing colored tie and pocket square, looking like the perfect gentleman right now.
Thank you very much. Well, I do my best. And one has to keep standards. Patricia, one has to keep standards these days.
Absolutely,
in the days of bad dressing, I shall refer to it as bad dressing.
Bad dressing, yes. Well, you are bringing it today, and I appreciate it.
Very much. Well, you're looking delightful as well. I like the pink and blue combination. Very nice.
Thank you. I had to bring it because I knew you were gonna be donning an amazing outfit. So I'm putting on a dress for this podcast today.
Oh, well, I greatly appreciate it.
So this is the part of the show where we have the big reveal as to what song, or in this case, songs, best resonate with the story you're going to tell us today. Can I get a drum roll, please? Zach, what songs best resonate with the stories you're going to tell us today?
Well, yeah, as you said, Patricia, I couldn't choose one. I'm an 80s child, right? And
yes,
80s music. When you said this and you asked me, I was like, oh my God, I don't know. I had thousands and thousands and thousands of thoughts. And I just had no idea. And then I sort of went, well, I've got to think about the story, right? So
yes.
Then I was thinking, right, there's 2 songs that resonate with me, particularly for this story. And the first one is Robert Palmer's Looking for Clues.
Yes.
Which is the legendary Robert Palmer, who sadly left us far too early, an amazing artist and amazing. A great performer. And then the second one, which is an 80s icon, is Pat Benatar. And it was from a soundtrack, and it's called Sometimes the Good Guys Finish First. And it was from a movie called The Secret of My Success. And I'm a big Pat Benatar fan in the 80s. And so this was the tune that resonated with me.
Wow. You picked some amazing songs and you went a little deeper into the 80s. You know, these weren't obvious picks, and I appreciate you going a little bit deeper into the archives of the 80s music. And, you know, Robert Palmer, absolutely iconic. And this song came out was released in 1980, and it was the second single from his 6th album, which is unbelievable, Clues. And it was written and produced by Robert Palmer. In addition to that, it reached number 33 on the UK charts. So there you have it. Now, Secret of My Success, amazing movie with Michael J. Fox. I mean, we can't talk about the 80s without Michael J. Fox in it. And you know, and then of course about the song, Pat Benatar, she is the 80s. I just love the message in that song, and you'll talk more about this as we go. But here's something really fascinating. And as I was doing my little deep dive into looking at these songs and listening to them, I learned that from Wikipedia, thank you, Wikipedia, In 2020, a musical was going to be based on this film, Secret of My Success, and it was going to take place in, I believe it was Chicago. And what had happened was they were set to premiere in 2020, and then as it turned out, they had to shut it down. So it was going to be its world, premiere pre-Broadway tryout, and it was at the Paramount Theater actually. And anyway, it's just unfortunate that it that occurred, but it was supposed to be February 21st through March 29th of 2020. And it was the Illinois governor, had obviously had to shut it down. So it would have been an amazing show to see.
Oh
That's
God,
for
yeah.
sure.
I'm like, I didn't know that, and I know them. I know they're doing a lot of making 80s movies into to musicals.
Musicals. Yes.
And I think that would have been brilliant. I mean, Secret of My Success is one of those movies that if you were in the 80s, you would have watched it. If you didn't grow up in the 80s, you have no idea about it. I think that's
Exactly.
because it was
True.
so big in the 80s because of Michael J. Fox. And yet,
Yes.
If you were not grew up in the 80s, you didn't watch all those 80s movies, you would just go, Matt, who? What? Michael J. Fox, Back to the Future, and that's kind of about it for the 80s
Yes.
for him. I mean,
yes.
But he was such a prolific actor in those days. I mean,
unbelievable.
Teen Wolf, of course.
Yes.
And
Family Ties.
Family Ties, yeah, which of course in the UK wasn't that big, so we didn't have it so much in the UK.
Yes.
He was more movie star for the UK audience. But yeah, so Family Ties, but all of that sort of stuff. And then I remember Bright Lights, Big City, which was another early 90s movie he starred in.
Yes. Wow, that's really fascinating. Yeah. I love Michael J. Fox. I think Michael J. Fox is amazing, and was such a great actor. And from what I hear, really good guy, and he does a lot for Parkinson's. I know that. I mean,
huge amounts of Parkinson's, and so tragic that he suffered from this horrible deliberating disease.
Yes.
And just such a lovely actor and a great comic timing. I mean, he makes it look so effortless, which is really hard in comedy, right? You make that sort of good guy, effortless charm come across is beautiful.
Yes.
But yeah, so Michael J. Fox, fantastic. Secret of My Success, actually a really good movie. Catch it. It's on.
Catch it.
Yes. I saw it again. I think it was on Amazon Prime or one of the streaming services. And I saw it great. Probably about during lockdown. I watched it again during lockdown.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Another song that appeared in Secret of My Success was a song called "Oh Yeah" by Yellow. Do you remember the band Yellow? So that song appeared in so many movies. So that was like, it appeared, I think, in 6 movies during the 80s.
Wow.
And it was because Yellow became this really sort of go-to background track, like big music geek, especially 80s music geek, like Tangerine Dream. Do you remember?
Yes, I know Tangerine Dream. Yes.
From Risky Business and all that sort of stuff. They sort of did a load of the sort of background music for a lot of movies.
Yes.
So Yellow became sort of the second run for that.
Yeah, very good.
Sidebar.
So yes, well, we could continue to talk all about 80s song and these amazing movies and soundtracks and Pat Benatar, the whole 9 yards. We want to hear
what an 80s hero.
Yes, exactly. What I'd love to hear is your story that resonates with the songs that you chose.
So, well, let's take a dive back. So I was born in 1972, and I was diagnosed with asthma when I was 3 months old, but not like bad, easy asthma, as I would refer to it, really bad asthma. And certainly not the drugs that we have today for asthma. There wasn't that level of drugs. So I spent probably about conservatively 70% of my life till I was about 10 years old, either in hospital or certainly bedridden.
Wow.
Because of the asthma. And I spent months and months and months in an oxygen tent. I spent months intubated, which now we know, thanks to COVID, what that means, which is basically tubes in your nose to help you breathe. And I was a very sick child. My mum used to sort of, middle of the night, drag me to Great Ormond Street, which is a famous children's hospital here in London. And literally the porters knew her by sight and just waved her into the ward, because that was how bad I was all the time.
Wow.
So off the back of that, and two things occurred. One is the fact that I didn't go to school till I was pretty much 10. Didn't really go to school, and in those days, no internet, no television, because the television was basically in the one. There was a special room for television in the hospitals in those days. You didn't have televisions at the end of your bed or anything like that now, and I couldn't go watch it. So all I did was read. So I basically read, and then when I was at home, I watched movies. Lots of movies. My mum was a big movie fan, so that's kind of where my education came from. And my father left when I was 4. Well, rather, my mum kicked him out when I was 4. So I had no male influences in my life. So most of my male influences came from literature and movies. And the reason I'm telling you all this brings to the next bit, which is the more important bit for the story and also for the music. I didn't have any social interaction skills. I didn't know. Social skills was not very good. Social intelligence was not great. It's okay. So I had some innate one, but I wasn't great because I didn't know what to do. And I was a kid at school who was incredibly skinny. It's hard to think about that now. Incredibly pale. The kid in the corner. And kids are cruel, so they made fun of you. And I used to get bullied and picked on and made fun of and all that kind of stuff. And I couldn't do any sport, so because that was kind of a bottom, I couldn't do that. And so it was just really difficult. And it's really difficult for a 12-year-old, 10 to 12-year-old dealing with this stuff. And my mum was a single mum with 2 jobs, and me, a sick kid, and then my younger brother. It's very hard. So I remember very clearly, I think I was about 12. And I had a particularly bad day. And I remember sitting on the windowsill, the window ledge of the house that we lived in, on my bedroom, which was on the 4th floor. And I had bad thoughts. Thoughts that you shouldn't have when you're 12. And thoughts you shouldn't have at any time, really. But certainly when you're 12, who will miss me? Why am I here? Maybe I should have gone earlier. The asthma, should have, all that kind of stuff. Not great. And I sat there pretty much all night till about 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, when the sun rose, because it was summer. And I got off the windowsill. I had a moment of clarity and epiphany. I kind of realized that I could control myself. So I got off the windowsill, went into my bedroom, and I stood in front of a mirror, a floor to ceiling, a full length mirror, which I still have to this day. It still sits in my bedroom. And I said a bunch of phrases to myself. I didn't know at that time it was sort of positive psychology. It was affirmations. I didn't know those things, those terms that I know now. I didn't know them then. I just stood in front of the mirror and said, I am confident. I am, I just sort of listed 19 things that I wanted to be.
Wow.
And I did that in the morning. I did that the same thing in the evening. And I did that every day till I was 21. And life didn't change immediately. It didn't go overnight. But it started to change. And that the affirmations started to hit into the subconscious. What you say about yourself is really important. How you describe yourself is really important. The words you choose are really important. And a couple of things changed. I mean, I was reading a lot, but I kind of really, my curiosity was sparked at that point. and I just kind of went, I want knowledge, I want stuff. So I
Yes.
started reading books that 12-year-olds don't generally read. I started reading personal development books. I started reading psychology
Wow.
books. I started reading, anything I could get my little grubby little paws on.
Yes.
And at the same time, my male influences were, I sort of wanted male influences. So I went after people I admired. So many of your listeners will have no idea who I'm talking about, but I'm going to list 3 people who I admired at the time for my male role models.
Mm-hmm.
And one was a gentleman called Danny Kaye, who is a very famous polymath in the 30s, 40s, 50s, early 60s. Then there was an actor called David Niven, who was a very famous British actor. And then the last one was a gentleman called Sir Peter Ustinov. And Peter Ustinov was another polymath, actor, director, writer, composer.
Wow.
And I sort of chose them as my role models, partly because they were incredibly curious people. They're incredibly smart and polymathic people, multi-talented people, and part because of their manners, their consideration, their kindness. I mean, David Niven is held up to this day as an exemplar of being a perfect gentleman. Right? I mean, one of my favorite stories about David Niven was actually at his funeral. The porters, so the guys used to carry the luggage around at Heathrow back in the day when you did do that, they sent the largest wreath to his funeral.
Wow.
And they said that never has a truer gentleman walked through the halls of Heathrow Airport.
Wow.
So if you imagine the porters got together and gave money to this, I mean, that kind of blows your mind.
Is it? Yes.
So that's where kind of my things, and I started to embody the, I wanted to be true to those values. I wanted to be true to that thing of being good, morally true, the gentlemanly values. I didn't really articulate it till much later. But that's kind of was in my head. And also this level of curiosity. I just wanted knowledge. Still to this day, I always want knowledge. I'm the worst person in the world. If you give me a subject that I don't know, I will sit there for like 2 hours going through Wikipedia and then Google and then I'll buy books on it. My Amazon list will suddenly have 20 books on this particular topic, and I'm like, I must know more. And I think the internet's the worst thing for people like me, because I'm just like straight down the rabbit hole of knowledge, and I'm like, oh god, that's really interesting.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So and that's kind of what changed, and I really sort of came into my own. I mean, I'm not saying there's lots of other things didn't happen, but that kind of was I would say the main building block of my life and the main building block of everything else that's come over that. And I think it was probably about only maybe 6 years ago that I kind of realized that was the turning point.
The turning point for you. And that you still have your mirror.
I still have a mirror. It sits in my room. I mean, it sits in my bedroom. It comes with me everywhere. It's been it's a couple of nicks on it now, but it's like one of the most precious things I have. I tell you, it has stickers on it from when I was 12 or 13. So it's like there's a couple of like really weird stickers on it that I'm like going.
First off, thank you for sharing your story. And what a fighter you were. I just imagined you, in those tents and having to, having asthma to that severe level of asthma, and managing that as a young child, and just what a fighter you are. And then, having that pivotal moment at 12 after, kids are cruel, and I'm raising a 12-year-old right now. And boy, oh boy, it's not easy, for young gentlemen at 12,
No,
right? It's just not, especially if you are a nice guy, which I know you're going to talk a little bit about nice guys finishing first, or good guys finish first, right?
Good guys, not nice guys.
Nice guys, but good guys.
Good
But good guys, exactly. Nice and good are very different. We'll share. We can hash that out later as well. But as a youngster, and being a good guy, and among the middle school as we have it, in the U.S. it was called middle school, and the challenges that brings, and having that, here you are, had that tough, medical issues, getting bullied. You had that pivotal moment on the ledge there, and you watch the sunset, and like how incredible that perseverance, or that you sat on that ledge for all of that time until the sun came up. And that's a long time for a 12-year-old. Like time for us is way different than,
Yeah.
I remember trying to sit through mass for an hour, and I felt like it was like, an eternity, right? And so, but to have that time up on the ledge until, the sun came up, and then there you jumped off, got in front of your mirror, and started an affirmation, incredible, and
Thank
really
you.
incredible.
Well, I tell you the one secret, the trick, but I had no choice to be patient, because
Mhm.
hospitals are hurry up and wait, right? So,
Yes.
I would spend hours just doing nothing in hospital. So you have to learn to be patient and have time. And I still, to this day, there's lots of weird things that I have because of my hospitalization institutionalism.
Yes.
And I'm the most patient person. I'll just let things go, because
Wow.
and I'm always, whenever anyone goes, oh, I'm going to hospital, I go, bring a book. Don't use your
Mm.
mobile phone, just bring a book, read
Mhm.
yourself, because you're going to wait for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours at a hospital. So
Yes.
bring a book.
Yes. Wow. Yeah. And I mean, I can already, we're going to talk about strengths in a little bit, but I can already see them all popping through in your story. And it's unbelievable. And I love the people that you chose as your role models. And you picked a nice package. If only we could, pick our role models, and you picked three amazing ones, which heavily have influenced your entrepreneurship and your business and who you are to this day.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, very much so. And I mean, most people won't know any of them. I mean, that's
Mhm.
the interesting thing. But Danny Kaye, so Danny Kaye was a performer, a composer, a writer, a comedian. But most interestingly, for everyone out there listening to this, the one thing which I love about Danny Kaye, so Danny Kaye was the first ever UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
Wow.
he was the first ever UNICEF. Now UNICEF Goodwill Ambassadors are everywhere, right? Everyone's a
Yeah.
UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, but he was the first ever one. And then Peter Ustinov, my third choice, was the second one, and then Audrey Hepburn was the third one.
Oh, yes.
So that was the first three Goodwill Ambassadors.
Wow.
And you talk about good integrity people. Can't get much. I mean, there is some controversy about Peter Ustinov, but that was more about his father than him,
Hmm.
and of the day. But
Right. Right. But just the altruism that they had
yeah.
in wanting to use their power for good,
Oh god, yeah,
and it's, yeah, and the value system behind it. It's
exactly.
very,
Being a
very
good
good.
guy, you know.
Absolutely. So, in looking at the music and the songs that you chose, how do you link those together?
So I'm a big. I love music. It's one of the
Hmm.
things I really love. I have the most eclectic music taste I think I know of, because I'll listen to pretty much anything. And the one thing, the joy of my life now is Spotify's recommendation lists.
Yes.
Yeah, because I go, oh, that's interesting, because also I must confuse the Spotify algorithm completely, because I'm like, one day I'm listening to, jazz, and then
Yeah.
the other day I'm listening to Afrobeat, and then the
Yeah.
next day I'm listening to sort of 80s classics, and then um,
Yes.
the only things I don't listen to are real hardcore dance music, because that's not my thing,
Yes.
and modern rap. I find modern rap a bit repetitive for me.
Yeah.
But apart, and I do love that. So I love music, and when you asked this, I was like, okay, I've got to think. So I was thinking about the story, and I was thinking, right, okay, what is the most important thing? So Robert Palmer, another good man, another good gentleman, a really interesting man, fascinating character, not always perfect, and that's the whole point. You know, you're not always perfect, but he was a good man. And I loved his music, and looking for clues always resonated with me, because it was kind of one of those things of like, just always keep searching, right? Always keep learning, always keep the knowledge going. I mean, I'm, you know, one of the things I always say to the people I teach, the people I lecture, the people I engage with, I always say, just keep knowledge going. Don't stop learning. I'm always learning. I'm always learning new stuff. And I, you know, I'm 50 now, and that stale level of knowledge just is still there, right? I want to learn more. I want to learn more. You know, I'm not a formal learner, so I don't care about degrees or diplomas or stuff like that, but just the acquisition of knowledge, right? Just more knowledge. Just give me information. And then what happens is you get cross-fertilization, right? So if you learn something about here and then you learn something over here, and you kind of go, oh, actually, those two things are actually linked, even though they don't seem to be linked in the first part.
Right.
And then that sparks another bit of conversation, right? I always think that why I picked polymaths, so people who are multi-talented in different fields, is because those are the people that actually spark the great ideas of life, right? So Isaac Newton, Leonardo da Vinci, these guys are just polymaths. They're people who have multiple interests.
Yes.
And I think that's the key thing. So looking for clues, Robert Palmer, good person, great song, but just the underlying thing is just always keep looking for clues for life, looking for clues for things. And then sometimes the good guys finish first. Well, I think that's a really interesting thing, right? So we have this thing now where I'm a big believer in being a good guy is actually the thing you should do, right? And that's the whole basis of the company, The Perfect Gentleman, that I run. And it's about, you know, and there's a very big difference between being what people call the nice guy, in inverted commas. I'm sort of air commas at the moment for those who are listening. And a good guy, right? There's very different things. Because people assume nice guys are those who are walked over, they're too kind, they're too considerate. And to an extent, that's true, right? But there's a difference between a nice guy and a good guy. And a good guy is someone who is a man, so masculine in that sense of energy, and a person, sorry, should I say these days, and also, but has masculine energy, but also has the energy of respect and kindness and consideration and thought and romance and more softer skill sets. So the great idea of the warrior poet, right, is someone who can defend the village, but also write great poetry. Right. You know, and that's kind of the underlying instance of what a gentleman is, the gentle man, the gentilis homme, you know, the man energy and the gentle energy, the sort of masculine energy, and marrying the two and keeping those in balance. Because I think what we forget is that the balance is key, right? You want both energies in balance, makes you a whole person.
Yes.
Whereas if you are kind of over on hardcore masculine energy, then, you know, it's aggressive and then or you're overrun on a soft energy, then you're going to be walked over and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the balance, and that's true for both genders, or any gender, to be honest. It's not a gender specific thing, and that's what people get confused about when I talk about the gentleman. I'm not talking about gender specific roles. I'm talking about harmony.
Yes.
Of a gender.
Yes. And balance, like you said.
And balance, and being able to do all of it. And I think that, you know, we forget that, you know, certainly in this commercialized, capitalistic, very aggressive driven world, that we have to change the narrative and make it about good guys finishing first. Right. And that attitude of like, yeah, they do finish first. Not everyone has to be, excuse my language, an a-hole to get ahead. You can be a good person and get ahead. You can be a good individual and get ahead. You can be moralistic and true. And I think one of the things that human beings suffer from is when they see that somebody who's like that, supposedly like that, isn't like that. And then they go, well, that's just everyone's like that again. So it reinforces that bad, that aggressive, I have to take.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole raft of conversation we could have about that. But that's kind of where it came from. And I just kind of for that song, Pat Benatar as a legendary 80s singer, but that song really resonated for me for like going, yeah, sometimes the good guys do finish first, and they should. And, it's about that kind of attitude of like, yeah, okay, you just have to stick by your principles. Absolutely. And you have to stick by your honor code and your belief system and obey the golden rule, right? Which is the golden rule. 23 religions have the golden rule as one of their tenets.
Yes.
Which is, do unto others as you wish to be done unto yourself.
100%. Yeah. No, that's amazing. And bringing that value system, like you said, into it. And the balance between the two. And I'd love to hear and tell us a little bit about how this is your business and how you use this. Can you describe to the audience that?
Sure. So one of my main businesses is a company called The Perfect Gentleman, and it's basically, I kind of describe it as making the world a more gentlemanly place, one man at a time, and I specifically focus on men. And the reason I specifically focus on men, and I know we're having a whole gender debate at the moment, but let's just I use men in
fine. We're going to keep it like
gender,
that.
Gender term for use of language, is because I find men are underserved, and men have more problems. Mm-hmm. Women have less advantage because of their gender and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
But men have more problems, and the problems with men are a lack of identity.
Yes.
In a very changing world, they don't know what to do, and a lot of the problems we see are from a lack of moral codes, a lack of identity, a lack of role models. The role models are not, they're either rappers who are talking horrible stuff about, it's not all rappers, but you know what I mean? It's kind of very aggressive, non-balanced attitudes.
Right.
Capitalistic. I want to make money. Okay, well, why do I want to be rich. Well, why do you want to be rich? It's those kind of things, is that you don't get the underlying reason for it, and it's just because I want to have it and be that male, aggressive, dominating energy. And so I basically looked around the world and realized that there were nobody teaching men skills, and there was no framework for men to chat to each other about things like this without being laughed at, or derided, or where do you go to find information as a man about particular things? It's either so, for example, I'll give you an example. And this is I know it's very gender delineated in today's world, it's a bit weird, but there we go. But as a group of ladies or women, you would talk to each other about situations, right? You would have a friend group that you would go, oh, I went on this date last night, or I went out and I did this, and he said this, and you chat about it, right? Or how was the date, blah, blah, blah. Men, the following conversation takes place. Did you go out last night? Yeah. Did you have a good time? Oh, yeah. That's it.
Right.
There's no other conversation around that, right? There's no other, like, did you feel emotionally, did you like it? Did you engage with the person? Was she a nice, nice person? There's nothing else around that. It's very,
yes.
And men suffer from that. So we kind of, what we're trying to do is wrap up the internal learning with the external learning. So most men have no idea how to dress, right? They just follow whatever role model or what their partner purchases for them, or they don't have an idea about how to pick suits or ties
Yeah.
or jackets or trousers, what fits or what doesn't fit.
Right.
Excuse me, all looks good for
Yes.
them, and then they don't know how to go on a date or put a profile out there,
Mm-hmm.
or I have some young students of mine say, oh, how do you pick up women? And I go, no, 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 stop. Let's stop
Yes.
that now, right?
Right.
It's not about picking up women. That's conquest.
Yes. Yes.
It's
Yes.
about developing a relationship
Right.
with a person. And it's that kind of thing of you've got to build a relationship, and there's not a line, right? There's not like
Yeah.
one trick line that's going to work.
Right. Right.
You can use psychology to manipulate people, but then coaching of that relationship is bad, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't matter whether it's an intimate relationship or a work relationship. If you manipulated people from the start, your foundations are rocky, and you're going to
Right.
go wrong.
Yes.
So, but it's a framework. It's a way to teach romance, to teach style, to teach mental
Leadership skills too, it sounds like.
leadership skills, all of
Yep.
that sort of stuff wrapped up in
Mm-hmm.
a sort of pretty package.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. I love that and you can see so much of your story coming through, and then also how necessary it is to have this now, especially. And I think that I think you're absolutely right on, watching roles change. I've seen them change as far as with men throughout the years. You know, chivalry, like the discussion around chivalry, when to be chivalrous and when not, when, like all those questions, like, you know, oh, it's like we could sit here and talk about for this forever, but let me just give you an example. So when I was working at a juvenile detention center, and we were coming in with lawyers, and I was a therapist, so we were coming in together, and this was in Mobile, Alabama. Okay, so we're all coming together in this meeting, and I was a young professional, very, and I needed to prove myself as a woman and being in this environment and all of that. Well, when I walked in, this southern gentleman next to me pulls my chair out to before I sat down. And normally on a date or something like that, that would be very chivalrous. But when I'm trying to prove myself in a community, that was mostly male at that, at the table,
Oh, yeah.
I felt a little like it was out of line, and I said thank you, and then I carried on. But it was one of those, it was a tough situation because I understand his intentions were good, but in that environment, it was a challenge. So it just, from that, I just will never forget that moment, because it's the first time that I really could see that dichotomy.
Yeah, and it's the ability to read the room, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I always use the phrase. So everyone asks me, if there's like one, everyone wants a one tip wonder, right? And I call bullshit on that. Sorry,
Right.
but I mean, there's never a one answer, right? It's never like a simple. There's no easy way to make money. There's
Right.
no easy, there's no easy way to be a gentleman. It's one of those things. Everyone goes, "Oh, are you a gentleman?" I go, "I try." It's a journey, not a destination. You've got to try.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that's really important about reading the room and understanding. And we always say, the first rule of a gentleman is to make others at ease at the expense of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So in
Mm-hmm.
that situation, as a gentleman reads the room, looks at you, and you're the only woman in the room, he should know
Right.
that you need to prove yourself in
Mm-hmm.
this all-male environment, and he should give you the support that you need to do that.
Right. Right.
That's
Yeah.
the gentleman.
Yes. Yeah, it's so interesting. I love what you're doing.
Thank you.
Uh and and I understand you work with a multitude of ages, and you work
Yeah,
in businesses as well.
Yep. So we work across the board, and also a lot of our skill sets. So the style thing is mostly male focused, but everything
Yes.
else is non-gender specific. So the
Yes.
romance stuff is non-gender specific. The manners, the etiquette, the thought process, the leadership stuff, the presentation skill stuff, that's all non-gender specific. The only thing that's relatively gender specific is style.
Yes.
But yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's so interesting.
and yeah, we work across the board and across the world. So I mean, and I find it very funny that most of our clients are not Western European.
Oh, really? That's so interesting that you say a lot of them are not Western European, and that you really are going across cultures. And that is fascinating, because I know from culture to culture, you probably have to be aware of their norms, but then also educating as well.
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting. It's kind of Western European men think they either are gentlemen or think they don't need the skills. But then you ask pretty much every lady or woman, and they would disagree with that. But we'll run with that as a different
Yeah.
conversation. But interestingly, like our bigger clients are America, Asia, Africa, and yes, you do have to have cross cultural knowledge. But it is also about educating, and understanding what the principles of gentlemen are. And then when you start getting into that in depth, and they kind of go, oh, okay, and you start seeing the connections click. You go, why do you have relationships like that? And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Why do you behave like that? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Stop thinking about your cultural norms and start thinking about how to expand them,
Right.
make it different and change the narrative.
Right. And in my case, this was down south, even within the United States, Southern gentlemen versus, the Northern versus West Coast, there's even nuances within that. And I think it just comes down to, like what you were saying about being a gentleman and the balance between having your masculinity, owning that masculinity, but then at the same time having your value system and bringing those pieces together. And I love that you're providing a space for men to be able to talk about things that they may be laughed out if they're out with the bros. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
And like, you can see, like, I can picture the bros, and exactly the conversation that you had. And raising two gentlemen of my own, men are sensitive beings, who also need to share, and who also need to process, emotion and all of that. So it's and
But
I
it's
yeah.
what the highest killer of men under the age of 45 is suicide. And that's generally because of not understanding ourselves and not being repressed and being emotionally not being able to talk
Mhm.
to anyone. That sort of male stiff upper lip. You gotta
Right,
and
grin and bear it,
grin and bear it and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, and that's just completely wrong. And I think now is a time that we need to see that shift,
Yeah.
because it's especially with everything with COVID, and things have been magnified. Things that were always there have been magnified
Oh God, yeah.
through the pandemic, and now everything that's going on in Ukraine. And, just I find that big life events, big things, magnify those.
Oh God, yeah.
So, all right. So honestly, I could talk, this could be a 5-hour podcast.
Trust me, I could probably talk for 5 hours as well.
I just am so fascinated by all of this. And so, but we're going to move into strengths. And, that given that this podcast is rooted in positive psychology, um, we talk about the VIA strengths, and the VIA strengths are 24 characteristics that are who you are to your core. So it's ranked, everybody has these strengths, all 24 of them. And they're ranked as to what your how you express yourself in the world. What are your top strengths? What are your top strengths? And then, when you see ones at the bottom of the list, I want to say that for those that are taking this, the audience that's taking this, so if you see ones at the bottom of the list, they are not weaknesses. They are your lower strengths. So they're just ones that you don't use as often or haven't used as often or are more challenging to use. So they can still be used by in different ways. But I just want to preface that if you're taking this via Strengths, which I believe that everybody should take and is completely free, it's also in 40 different languages. So now that this podcast is global, those of you in other countries speaking different languages, absolutely take the via Strengths, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Go for it.
So what are your top strengths? And I've got them in front of me if you need.
Oh no, you have to remind me.
Yes, I'll remember. Yes. Okay. Zach's top, he's got okay. So first off, audience, you're already going to be able to hear all of these strengths in the story that he's shared with us today. But number one is creativity, is his top strength. And what's interesting about that strength is that with creativity, you need to give the creative people space in order to explore, to go down the rabbit hole, as he was speaking of, to get that information. And so when we have tight, time-bound deadlines, that makes things challenging, because you can't explore all of the things that you want to do. However, creative people may never finish a project and I'm laughing because that's me, if I'm given too long of a deadline, or never a deadline, then, that's a challenge too. So we do need some structure within the creative space. But so Zach's number one is creativity. And then secondly is love of learning. So when he was in the hospital, you could see, I'm going to let you talk to your strengths, but I can see spotting them. You were love of learning. You were reading those books because you had time. You had a lot of time and you couldn't get enough of it. Then you've got social intelligence. Isn't that fascinating? So isn't that fascinating that number 3 is social intelligence? And that was one that you had shared with us was more uncomfortable for you as a child because you were in the hospital often. And then next we've got hope. Hope is number 4. And then number 5 is curiosity. So in looking at those and identifying for your own life, what would how would you see those resonate with the story?
Oh, it's very true. Well, where it resonates with stories, it's just very interesting that those 5 are there. What's really interesting for me, I think, is social intelligence, because as I keep telling to people all the time, these are skills, right? You can improve them, you can get better with them, you can do things. And I tell my students, I had no social intelligence when I was a kid, and I learned to be socially intelligent, right? Yes. It's something that I've grown to love and master and become part of my DNA. But when I was 5, I might have been intrinsically there, but yes. It certainly wasn't something that was I learned to do well. Yes. Until I was older, and then I learned the skills to do that. Creativity, absolutely. I totally agree with your the boundaries and no boundaries.
Yes.
So I have a friend of mine who I don't know if you're a star sign astrological person.
Yes.
But I'm an Aquarian. And Aquarians are known for being all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. One of my friends and colleagues is an Aquarian. He's all over the place. And my girlfriend said, God, how can you be the same we were born in the same year and all that sort of stuff, and not the same day, but and he's like, how can you be so different? I said, I learned to control the all over the place. So I have to put structure into my life.
Yes.
If I don't put structure in my life, then I'm just all down the rabbit hole all the time.
Yeah, right.
So I put deadlines on myself. I'm diary like a lunatic. I'm, because if I don't, like you were saying, I just go, ooh,
right.
Ooh, and nothing ever gets done. So so the joys of creativity. I love creating stuff. Creating is the best thing. I'm very bad at being an entrepreneur and being creative. So I love creating stuff. I'm not very good at long-term running stuff. I
Right.
generally hand it on after that.
Yes.
Because the curiosity means there's a whole new idea to come along.
Absolutely.
And hope, yeah, I'm always really hopeful. I think it's really interesting. You said hope was on the skills. As I always say, people go, why are you always so happy? Why are you always so positive? And I go, every day above ground is a good day, right? I'm alive, I'm breathing, I have clothes on my
Yes.
back, I have a roof over my head, I have food in
Right.
my fridge. You know, there are a lot of people worse off than me.
Mm-hmm.
And why shouldn't I be hopeful? Why shouldn't I be happy about this? Why shouldn't I be
Yes.
positive about this? That's kind of the thing that I think is the hope, right? I hope for everyone, and I keep hoping for other people as well. I hope everything will work out. I prepare for the worst,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but I always hope that everything
Hope
will work
for
out.
the best. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's linked, hope is linked to life satisfaction, meaning and happiness in life is hope. And then also engagement in life, is also
And
linked to that.
and I think that's really interesting. I'm I'm very rarely unhappy with what is my life, and I think that's partly because of that, but partly because I kind of just go, if I'm unhappy with it, it's generally my fault,
Mm-hmm.
right? I've generally made a choice, or I haven't done something which has made me unhappy.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Very rarely is it circumstances beyond your control.
Yes. Well, and looking at you had circumstances beyond your control as a young child.
Yeah,
And, there you were, reading, getting as much information as possible and, having, pivotal moment where, you then started affirmation. You're like, this is the way that I need to do this moving forward. And I can see, yeah, I'm not sure where perseverance is, but I feel like it's in your middle strengths. And I feel that, with perseverance, that you definitely have that, and bravery, and, there's so many. And so that's what makes me think about, we do have strengths that we lean into at certain times because we have to.
yeah,
And the thing that I've learned the most about the VIA strengths and having to lean into some hard strengths more recently is the idea of towing strengths. So, for instance, with love of learning, if you're doing something for the first time and you're scared and you have to lean into bravery, well, you've got love of learning that's going to tow along your bravery so that you can achieve what you would like.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really interesting. I talk about that same. I use the similar thing, but I when I sort of go, here's your value sets, here's your talk to students, and when I teach personal development stuff, and I go, here's your values, here's your strengths, and I go, but if for example health and fitness is not some of your top strengths, but you need to get health and fitness, find another strength that will drive you to that, right? So
Yes.
for example, if it's love of learning, if love of learning is your thing, so learn a new skill, which is fitness.
Yes. Exactly. Try a new workout,
Yeah,
that's such a great point. Such a great point. Love it. I would love to know how the audience can get a hold of you as far as to be able to coach with you, to be able to take your professional, especially our male clients.
so
How.
you can find social media's the perfect gentleman.
Mhm.
So we're the P gentleman across all social media, Instagram, Twitter, the perfect gentleman. If you want to, we are about to launch. So in where are we now? 2022. So June 2022, we're about to launch our first online course. So
Oh,
if you
great.
want to join us for that, we're doing a 6-week sort of
Mhm.
intensive live mentoring course for 6 weeks, sort of
Amazing.
all the basics to become the perfect gentleman. And we're going to run that pretty much 2 or 3 times a year.
Oh, that's
Um,
fantastic.
for that. There's going to be limited numbers because it's in person. You know, it's online, but it's live. We want sort of more engaged, and there'll be special guests. It'll be me, but there'll also be special guests for specialized areas. So that would be fun to do. And yeah, so social media, the P Gentleman or the Perfect Reviews, just search the Perfect Gentleman. And yeah, over the next, we're sort of relaunching at the moment, our post-COVID joy. So we're relaunching. So yes, over the next sort of 6 to 8 months, you'll see lots of stuff come out for us. The podcast that we've had will be relaunched and stuff.
Exactly. So your podcast, is a great. I've listened to it. It's really fantastic.
Yeah. So we're relaunching that after when I get back, because I'm away for a month now. And then we're relaunching that. Yeah. So, and then personally, you can find me. I have the most unique name in the world, Zachary Falconer-Barfield. So if you just Google me, I'm on Instagram as @Zach ZACHFB. And you can connect with me on there. That's probably the best platform currently to contact me, or LinkedIn or whatever. I'm out there. Just Google my name and it will come up. That's kind of I'm not very good at the self-promotion stuff, I have to say. That's not my strength list.
Not my strength either. Can you share with us what you're going to be doing for a month? Would you mind sharing with your audience? Because I think it's so inspiring.
Sure. So I'm going to walk the Camino Way, the Pilgrim's Way, which is across the north of Spain and ends up in Santiago de Compostela, which is a town in northern Spain where allegedly the bones of St. James is stored. I'm not doing it I'm not a religious person. I'm not doing it for the religious pilgrimage, but I am doing it for the spiritual pilgrimage. So I am walking 700 odd kilometers, which is what, I can't do it in miles, 500.
Yeah, that's quite all right. Yeah, I couldn't do it fast.
Across the north of Spain in a month. So 28.
Wow. 28 days, and that is incredible. And given, if you look at your life and how you started off, sick and in the hospital and all of that, and now here you are,
losing
28 days.
COVID weight. That's basically, I think.
You and everybody else in the world.
I think it's very good. It's an intensive way to lose the COVID weight.
Yes.
If you want to journey, social media, I'll be posting all the time on Instagram for it.
I cannot wait to see it, and huge congratulations to you and the bravery. And I'm sure you're going to be leaning into your love of learning the whole time that you're there. Yes,
the audiobooks and the podcasts.
Sure. Exactly. Okay, finally, here's the part where we talk about 80s trends before we sign off here. So I have it all here, and so in the 1980s. Let's start with, wow, it's so hard. Okay, what was your favorite 80s trend in the UK in the 80s?
The 80s trend is really hard to think. I was a big 80s kid, so I did a lot of 80s stuff. But I suppose I kind of American TV really came to the fore in the 80s.
Yes.
So I leaned into that a lot. And I was a big fan of American TV. I was a big fan of TV generally. So 80s trend. I'm trying to think. What did I write? I don't remember what I wrote.
You wrote down cowboy boots.
Yeah, we see cowboy boots is really interesting. So I have very big feet. And in Europe, shoe size stops about 11. So you can't. Wow. So to buy normal shoes beyond 11 is very hard. And right? I don't like wearing trainers. Yeah. So the only shoes I could find that would fit my 12 and a half size UK feet, which is about 13 and a half in America.
Yeah.
So big feet for, 20 or 50 years ago, 40 years ago. So cowboy boots are the only thing I could find. So I used to wear cowboy boots. So I still have them. I still have
like 4 pairs. That's awesome. That's amazing. Oh, fantastic. All right. So your first record, 45 record from the 80s. So I know you understand you have one from the 70s, but which one do you have from the 80s?
So this is hugely embarrassing. Okay. So this is hugely embarrassing. The first 45 I bought. So from the 80s, I bought earlier music.
Yes.
So I try and go. I didn't buy this first. It wasn't the first 45 I brought, but the first 80s 45 I brought was The Lion Sleeps Tonight by Tight Fit,
That's
which got to
amazing.
#1 in the UK. It was originally by the Tokens, I think, in
Yeah.
1964. But yeah,
That's a
so
great song.
it's a great song, but it's a little embarrassing because it
Well,
was a very bad version.
yeah. Okay, so then what would be your favorite character?
This one was easy. When you asked this one, I was just like, oh my God, this is so easy. Sonny Crockett, Miami Vice.
Oh yeah. Well, that
I,
says it all.
I loved the style. Miami Vice for me was just the style. I've never been a car person, so I never cared about the car. But for me, his style, I was just like, oh God, unstructured linen suits, an espadrille
Yes.
in pastel. Oh my God.
Okay, so since you brought cowboy boots to the UK in the 80s, I think you can bring back Miami Vice looks.
Yeah, I need to be I post Camino. I'll probably be able to get into
Yeah.
the um, but yeah, I did have an unstructured linen suit in the late 80s and espadrilles and pastel, and I used to think that I was Sonny Crockett, but
Yeah. I
uh,
mean, yeah,
but no, I
I can
mean,
see it.
yeah, I just it was very cool, and Miami Vice is still up there on my all-time TV greats.
Mm, it
That and a very
is.
British show called Blackadder. Those are my two sort of
Okay.
80 shows
Oh, very good.
that I loved. But yeah, Miami Vice. If I could do that, if I could bring it back, I would. But I think
Okay.
maybe not.
Well, you know what? If anybody's gonna bring it back, it's gonna be The Perfect Gentleman. So
Oh,
there
thank you
you
very
go.
much.
All right. So lastly, commercial. What was your favorite commercial of the 1980s?
See, this is really hard because I try to remember loads of them. There were loads of them. And the
Mm-hmm.
one that kind of sticks in my head because it's one of the ones. So I thought about the milk tray man. So the milk tray man was a guy who delivered chocolate to women in the middle of the night. And he was dressed in black and he was gentleman. He was like James Bond. And then I
Yes.
thought, do you know what? But the one that sticks in my head is a brand of lemonade. So
Yes.
like 7-Up for the States
Yes.
called R Whites. And there was this guy called the R Whites man who's the secret lemonade drinker.
Ooh.
And he would, R Whites, secret lemonade drinker. And he would climb
Yes.
down the stairs and sing this song and open the fridge. And it was just bizarre advert that sticks in my head. So there you go.
I
That's the one
love
I
it.
think.
I need to Google those. Like, I need to go on YouTube and Google those because I'm sure I can find them. Because growing up in the U.S., we didn't have that commercial. And when we had Cole Deep on a couple, Kay was here a couple weeks ago. She chose that one as well, and it's just like I've got to go back and look at
Did she
UK
choose the R Whites
commercials.
lemonade?
She did. She sure did. And
Because it
she
was
sang
so
it. Yeah,
seminal.
yeah, yeah. She's
So
yeah.
seminal. Because
Yeah.
it's one of those ones in the 80s because we had really bad adverts in the 80s, and then we had a couple of ones that you kind of stick in your head, like the Milky Bar
Mhm.
Kid,
Mhm.
Milk Tray Man. But yeah, there was very few ones that kind of stick in your head. There was a coffee one that had sort of an ongoing um,
Yes.
storyline to it. But yeah,
Yes.
there was a few. Yeah, we had really bad adverts. Let's just
Yeah.
say we had really bad adverts.
I don't know. If they're still singing them today, then they did mission accomplished. Mission
Yeah, that's
accomplished,
true.
right?
It's true.
Right? So, well, Zach, I have to tell you, it's been such a pleasure having you on this podcast today. And I just want to thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for being here and sharing your story and two amazing songs. And and I love what you're doing, and I
Thank you.
think that this is now that you're talking about this more, and I had done research prior to this just on what you were doing. It's just unbelievable how you're helping men and your
Thank you so
mission.
much. Thank you. Well, let's spread the word.
We
Let's make
will.
the world a better place. Because I think
Absolutely.
if we find balance, then we can express balance.
100%. And with the ever evolving gender and, all that's gone through the years. We just haven't been able to really keep up with the ever-changing world,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
philosophy. Yeah. Well, thanks again for being here, and thanks for coming on the show. And until next time. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for having me, and I appreciate it and look forward to another long conversation. I'm sure we'll have
yes.
We'll have another 5 hours.
Exactly. I would look forward to it. Until next time.
Thank you.